bringing back bills such as the assault weapons ban. I would not be surprised if the State of the Union does not have, after this incident, something like the assault weapons ban. I think the president
won't go anywhere. So clearly you have a top Clinton advisor who helped him get through the assault weapons ban. He specifies in polling. His big specialty is seeing if the population will accept any given measure at a given time. Polling expert. He thinks they're going to use the Gifford shooting for the assault weapons ban. He's not totally correct because there's been so much heat that really there's an American revolution starting over the gun issue. If they really try to ban guns, people are going to go absolutely crazy with fury. There's a reason people are buying 5 million guns, 4 million guns, 2 million guns per month in this country. It's not to get violent. It's to send a clear message that you don't infringe upon the Second Amendment rights. But they're trying to. How? Obama has always said it. Under the radar. That's what he told the Brady Commission. And so now they're trying to work it through the UN gun treaty. This Batman massacre happens. Oh no, another shooter. Will it be enough to shift the votes they need to ratify this stinking treaty that violates our Second Amendment? Let's hope not, but it's pretty clear they would like to use it for that in conjunction with Obama's upcoming re-election. And finally, we have, of course, Michael Weiner Savage, who also predicted another Reichstag fire type event, another false flag in the Obama administration to help with re-election and again blame the right wing. We'll play that clip as well.
I made a prediction on this show yesterday that I'll repeat right now so that you can mark it down. Savage predicts a Reichstag fire-like event sometime within the next year or two in America that will have been conducted by the government and blamed upon subversive elements in order to permit a dictatorship and a naked dictatorship to emerge in this country. If you think I'm making this up, you're right, I'm making it up. But I'm not making it up out of whole cloth. I'm making it up out of historical cloth.
And so we've asked the question at INFOWARS 2 years ago, of course, will Obama force America to absorb a terror attack to save his presidency? Well, it doesn't quite look like 9/11 every time. Everything's different. But will it be a combination of Giffords, Trayvon, and now the Batman massacre? Could something else happen before the election? Could something else happen even before this UN gun treaty? We have to be on watch. So what is a false flag? Of course, it's a covert operation conducted by governments, corporations, other organizations that are designed to appear as though they are carried out by other entities. Of course, you know that, but it's the whole thing the public never gets about who benefits. Key bono. Why would they stage something? Well, let's look back to Denver. We were there less than a year ago to witness them doing drills about a shooter in a mall, a shooter in a sports stadium. What happens if there's a shooter in a school in the Denver area? They carried it out at more than 10 locations, trains, bus stations. They didn't do a movie theater, but it's not exactly outside of the realm of imagination. You have to remember that Homeland Security under Janet Napolitano has been all about rebranding al-Qaeda, because there are partners in Libya and Syria and probably the Iran war too, and rebranding it to white al-Qaeda. We got to look out for lone wolf attacks. We've got the FBI memo over here warning about theater attacks. So could it be a random white guy shooting someone up? Would they use that event to stage a pretext for clamping down on guns, for bringing in more security? They're already saying there's going to be more security at these theaters. And I guess they're going to roll out TSA everywhere and take away all the guns. I don't know. But you saw what happened with 9/11. Was it a false flag? Well, look at the evidence. They used it to launch the Afghanistan war, the Iraq war, and the larger war on terror. And every time Bush got in political trouble, they hit the button on the color-coded terror alerts and hyped it up in the media and used that to give Bush a political point bounce in the polls. And it's the same tactic they're using now with Obama on the backs of these gun tragedies. So looking further back into the evidence of false flags, there's so many cases, it's really too many to actually go through right here, but it's very historically based. Of course, there's Operation Northwoods, where they were going to stage shoot-downs of planes to enter us into a war with Cuba. They were going to stage sniper attacks in the D.C. and I think New York areas. The Pentagon admitted they were going to do this. This Operation Northwoods was, of course, declassified. It came out to public knowledge circa 2001, but this was going on back in 1962, circa then, when we were in the conflict with Cuba, around the time of the Cuban Missile Crisis, shortly after the whole invasion of Cuba failed, and the CIA had, quote, egg on their face. So they looked to stage attacks to get us into the war that the public, and Kennedy in particular, would no longer accept. Moving on, there's all the other cases. If we could just roll some of that terror storm footage, it's laid out very cleanly there. Of course, the classic 1933 Reichstag fire, when Hitler staged the patsy from the Communist Party. They burned down the Reichstag, which is the parliament building in Germany, and they blame the far left wing to allow Hitler and the Nazis to come into power. That was how they passed the Enabling Act, and that's how Hitler got his whole roll on. That's how he got his groove on, through a false flag. And they do it today, even if you don't think they're as nasty as the Nazis. So there's, of course, also Operation Ajax, which was the destabilization coup in 1953 in Iran to take out Mossadegh. That was an admittedly CIA-run operation. Kermit Roosevelt headed it. You saw Terror Storm if you've been watching this program, but what they don't want is a strong leader in any given country, so they stage an event to drive him out of office. Now, instead of doing an assassination in this case, they did a discrediting campaign by passing out the flyers and everything else, but that's on record. Then, of course, there's the Gulf of Tonkin. How do we get into the Vietnam War? Well, we'll say that they shot down one of our ships. Doesn't matter if the ship wasn't there. Doesn't matter if the ship went down. Doesn't matter if there was any gunfire. Doesn't matter if it really happened. The point is the perception in the media that we were attacked and need to now go to war. And there's some of the footage. Of course, the USS Liberty attack that Israeli helped stage with some of the U.S. forces to get U.S. in the war with Israel and Egypt. There was also the Lavon affair, where Mossad and other Israeli intelligence assets staged in 1954 an admitted false flag operation with many elements, but part of it was a theater fire shooting. And that was to keep British troops in Egypt for some of the same reasons. So you've always got a mix of geopolitical and purely political reasons, but they always want to push your buttons and set things up so that they are the saviors. The new regime, the new policy, the new law, what have you, is coming to save the day from these terrible false flag events. Now, moving on. Of course, the 7/7 bombing in 2005 in London. We've covered at length, of course, in the Terror Storm documentary itself, how the whole thing was staged. They were running drills just as they were doing the drill in Denver, just as they were doing tabletop drills in 9/11, dozens of them, in fact, on the day in London on the 7/7 bombings. They were running a nearly identical scenario in the London underground tube system on that day. There's a reason for that. It's partially to distract the mechanism, which is actually supposed to watch and catch these events, because they think it's just something that was part of the drill, and it secondarily operates as cover for an explanation as to why these things were going on, and so that handlers, in particular, so that the handlers don't get caught when they're found to be associated. Oh, they were just part of that drill. And then the public forgets about it, and the people inside the system either go along with it or freak out. And there are so many other false flag examples, it's just mentally exhausting to try to even list them all for you. But of course, there was the RFK assassination. Many people credibly believe that Sirhan may well have been on mind control substances of some kind. It was kind of an exotic period for mind control. Obviously, it was going on at the CIA. In fact, many CIA officials later admitted to being part of that assassination plot. And there was the whole deal with the woman in the polka-dotted dress, all the bizarre writings of Sirhan. But most importantly, there's the fact that the RFK assassination was used to hammer home the gun control. In 1968, they were already using his brother's death, the JFK assassination, and the MLK assassination to try to push through the Omnibus Crime Control Act and the Safe Streets Act of 1968, then the Gun Control Act itself. It wasn't going to push the House. The people knew that America would not accept it. And then the RFK assassination happened, and that was enough to push the votes over and get that dirty legislation through. Did you know that? It's on Wikipedia. They don't talk about it much, but it's true. Now, in this case, we don't know everything about the shooter yet. Those details are beginning to emerge, but we know they're trying to use the crises to bring out conversations about gun control. Should we have more security everywhere we go in public? At grocery stores, I guess, shopping malls. They've been talking about in Homeland Security for years now. Now, we're going to show you just a few examples of propaganda of how they cover the massacre, and then right next to it, you could argue subconsciously or just related on the same page are these conversations about what security measures we need. Let's roll those clips and talk about them. All right, so we've got the shooter. He's depraved. I believe that's in the New York Post. And then there at the bottom, gun sales spike. So it's got you thinking about gun sales. Should people even be allowed to own guns? Is this even America anymore if some crazed person goes into a theater in a town with gun control? Let's go to the next example. It's the Chicago Sun-Times. How can theaters keep people safe? All this terrible stuff about the movie massacre. How can theaters keep their customers safe? Now we have to talk about this nationwide. Let's just keep going through these one after another. Out of the darkness, the nightmare unreels. All these terrible tragedies, the victims hugging. And then down at the bottom, when the outrageous is ordinary. Experts suggest a number of Americans are becoming desensitized to violence, even mass murder. So we're blurring the lines between fiction and reality. Are we even still conscious of these episodes when they happen? They just kind of pass through the media as they bring up the countermeasure of safety and security. Well, what did Benjamin Franklin say about that? Here's the LA Times, the Midnight Massacre. Shocking headline, the big bold. And then buried in the bottom of the article, shaken film industry acts. Theater owners review security. So are we going to have TSA or some kind of equivalent security force? Well, many theaters already have security, but it's basically a joke. Anybody could do anything if they really wanted to. The purpose is you can't prohibit weapons. Anything could be a weapon. Any object of any size. This pen could be a weapon. It's all about the intent of the person. We should have a conversation about media violence and what's being put into people's heads. We should have a conversation about all these psychotropic drugs being prescribed for flimsy reasons. All this kind of stuff. We don't necessarily need TSA to show up at our toilet inspection agency, as South Park said. I think there's even more newspapers. Let's go on here. How many more must die, Mr. President? In other words, with Columbine, Virginia Tech, Bingham, it's kind of becoming an elephant in the room with these guns. How can we allow guns in these countries? Yeah, well, the SWAT teams don't even go in and stop the killer in most cases. Virginia Tech comes to mind, where they stood down for hours and made sure the victim toll spiked up.